I think it's making sure that your team understands their specific role as the larger organization. What are they bringing to the table and what is their specialty? And then empowering them with clear goals and
Hmm.
objectives in alignment with that service that bubbles up to a broader strategy. It helps
Yeah,
them feel connected to the operational plan.
absolutely.
It helps them continue to grow. And it also helps you evaluate their deliverables. And are they meeting objectives and are they delivering in an expected performance level?
Greetings and thank you for tuning into RAA Talks. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Hannah, like rye bread, and I'll be your host. Joining me today on the show is Helena McNeil. Helena is a digital transformation leader who has spent the last 15 years revolutionizing how Fortune 50 companies operate. Her passion lies in turning complex organizational challenges into elegant, scalable solutions that make a real difference in how people work. Helena has just ended her 10-year career at Amazon for a new role at Wells Fargo, which I'm super excited to introduce you guys and hear more about her experience. And before we do all of that, let me bring her on. Helena, it's such a pleasure to have you. What are you looking forward to our conversation today?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my experience and just have a casual conversation about what women go through in the workplace.
Absolutely. And at Raw Talks, we keep everything casual. So I'm so excited to just dive right in and learn from you and have listeners learn a lot from you as well. And speaking of learning, you just mentioned, wow, 10 years at one company. I've known other women in my personal career and women that I've spoken to that have had such a tenure. That's a long time to be somewhere and suddenly make a transition. How has that transition been for you so far?
It feels good. When I explained to my colleagues when I was leaving, I updated my Slack notice to say graduating from Amazon, graduating to customer, because 10 years at Amazon felt like going to med school. I
Wow.
put in a lot of hard work. It was stressful, but it was also really rewarding. And instead of graduating with debt, I graduated with finance and
Mm,
financial stability. So it was great. It feels like the right time professionally, as well
mhm.
as the team left at Amazon has a great vision to execute against.
Yeah.
And I'm confident that they'll be able to do that without me.
Makes so much sense. And it's funny how you said graduating. It's almost like you're taking listeners back
Yeah.
to this whole like, I went to go back to graduate school and do something to feel more fulfilled in terms of my degrees, but that's not really what's happening for you. And you said it was the right fit. So, sometimes people are even thinking like, when is the right time to go back to grad school? Or when is the right time to make this switch? My
Mhm.
age is getting in the way. Oh, I've been here for so long. Is it even the safe thing to do? I'm so scared. How did you know that right now was the right time and the right fit for you?
Well, there was a number of reasons. I think professionally, my growth had hit a plateau. And without having to relocate to a central site, I would have been blocked from further
Yeah,
progression. So
absolutely.
moving is not an opportunity for me. I have a daughter here in Minnesota and our family is located here. So I felt like it was time to identify a local company that
Yeah.
had growth potential and I could share my experience and knowledge with them.
That makes so much sense. And when you just said that you noticed your growth hit a plateau, that tells me that you have a keen sense of self awareness and understanding what's working for you and what's not. So, thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll go into more about how you would recommend other women facing similar issues or kind of not having that clarity for themselves and how you would recommend them
Mm,
navigating that path and building that self-awareness later in our conversation. But I remember when we first spoke that you also, I mean, you're there 10 years. Sometimes people can be in a company for 10 years and do the IC role, individual contributor. But I know you to be a leader, and you also described yourself as a people first leader. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what it means to you in practice, especially within a large, complex organization, to be a people first leader?
I think it boils down to understanding two things. What are your organizational objectives? And what are the stretch assignments that you have available? And then really working with your team to understand what are their core strengths and how can you align them? And then trusting your team to fail, like try and fail and give active feedback. I am passionate about my team's growth and want to make sure they have the right exposure and challenge to continue to grow in roles. My time at Amazon, I was able to promote at least 8 people in my tenure.
Oh.
And that's a difficult thing to do at Amazon. It's a very rigorous process to get people promoted, but
Mhm.
I do think my leadership style is a mix of meeting people with where their career goals are and making sure that the work that's assigned to them is getting the right attention from leadership and is impacting the strategic plan enough to justify their continued growth. And also recognizing when people are hitting their burnout. Like
Mm.
during the pandemic and since the pandemic, it has been a really stressful time, I think, for many, many people. And
Mhm.
working with them to be empathetic on giving them work life balance, allowing them to schedule their own time so that it works for them, and be candid and honest about deadlines, making sure that they understand what are must have hit deliverables and what has flexibility for them to move around in accommodation with their life.
Wow. It sounds like Amazon is losing a real gem with you going because you care so much about your people. And I know I've never worked at Amazon, but I know them to be customer first. And for you, your direct reports were your customers, in my opinion, from what you described. And it looked like you were just focused on not just meeting the strategic goals of the organization, but making sure the people who are fulfilling them are fulfilled themselves. And especially about burnout, I don't hear most leaders really taking into that, like really focusing on, is my employee going through burnout? Is there something that I can do to make sure goals are being met, but they're being taken care of in the process? How did you strike that balance as a leader, especially when you have expectations held on yourself as a manager for your teams?
Yeah. A few things that I did that I think helped were really focusing on organizational design and
Mm-hmm.
forecasting of demand.
Mm.
So each year, I think most companies do this. They plan out goals and they evaluate priority of those goals and then match their headcount to that. In my tenure at Amazon, I always worked in centralized teams that had supported cross organizational goals as a centralized team, and that often resulted in unplanned work
Mm.
coming to the team. Yes. So
It's like, when does
something
that
that I
not
did
happen?
exactly. As centralized orgs, it's really hard to be aware of everybody else's strategic
Absolutely.
plans because they'll write a goal or a PRFAQ that is, focused on the customer, but there are dependencies built in to integrations, to content, to change, to communications that aren't really thought of, but are going to impact the deliverable.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that I've done is build out resource pods based on dependency use case.
Mm.
So I worked with my team to categorize what are the support services that we offer, what are the key roles involved in that use case, and then what is the time estimation for that use case. And then I worked with my cross org teams to evaluate their goals, assign a use case, and that helped me then lead to headcount justification papers
Mm-hmm.
that I would turn into finance and headcount requests for a deprioritization of goals that we weren't funded or resourced for.
Wow. So it sounds like you really tried to make sure only did you focus on the goal, but you understand what the problem was so that your team can solve it, and also the cross-functional partners so that everybody's on board.
Yeah. And I would add to that, like understanding what is core and common
Mm.
across multiple teams. Is there a core underlying foundational deliverable that my team can deliver that would solve for many
Mhm.
dependencies? And then focusing my team's goals on delivering that to empower others.
Wonderful. Wow, that's so inspiring. I almost wish I was working under you right now. Thank you for walking us through that and explaining how your mindset works as a leader. It sounds like a beautiful framework that you just described. In complex organizations, sometimes figuring out what the goal is and where does my role as an IC fit in, an individual contributor fit in, can be difficult. But the way you described it sounds like your teams must have really understood the intricate details of the goal without it being so complex. And that just shows what a leader you are, because what I believe for wonderful leaders are People who focus on growing their teams, not just telling them what to do. And on top of that, they're able to take something very complex and translate it into language that the people that they're leading can understand so that they can
Mhm.
deliver. And it sounds like you just nailed that one on the head. But how do you feel about that
Yeah,
description of yourself as a leader in terms of what I just said?
I would agree. I think it's making sure that your team understands their specific role as the larger organization. What are they bringing to the table and what is their specialty? And then empowering them with clear goals and
Hmm.
objectives in alignment with that service that bubbles up to a broader strategy. It helps
Yeah,
them feel connected to the operational plan.
absolutely.
It helps them continue to grow. And it also helps you evaluate their deliverables. And are they meeting objectives and are they delivering in an expected performance level?
Absolutely. That makes total sense. And it sounds like that would also help with motivating your team to stay focused on their goal at hand and not looking to jump ship. Because sometimes people can get so caught up in, why am I even doing this? It doesn't even make sense. Or I don't fully understand the purpose of my work. And then people start questioning,
Mhm.
why am I even here when the work they are doing is meaningful? It's getting high visibility. But because the leader sometimes is not providing that visibility to the individual contributor, they start seeing a picture that's not really the clear picture. So it sounds like what
Mhm.
you're doing is providing a lot of clarity for your team so that they understand, they do it right, and you guys actually are successful in meeting the company's organizational goals in the process. But you also mentioned
Mhm.
one thing. You also mentioned knowing that my team has the ability to lead as well. And I know you mentioned earlier you were able to lead 8 of your team members into promotions within your tenure. So I'm curious about one
Mhm.
thing. How did you identify and nurture that leadership potential within your teams?
Great question. I start with what are their peers? How do their peers react? Are they
Mm,
respected amongst their peers?
mhm,
And that tells me that they're a natural leader. And most of my promotions were into an individual contributor next level. There was a few that led to leadership roles. I would say proactive career development when an individual comes to me as their manager with a clear plan. Like this is what I want to achieve.
mm,
I think as a leader, you need your directs to advocate for themselves and you will advocate for them in response. But
uh-huh,
until somebody communicates what they're looking for
uh-huh,
and what they want to do, it's difficult to empower others or evaluate their leadership ability. So there's that. I would say peer review, self advocacy, and then work deliverables. Are they good communicators? Can they
uh-huh.
hold an audience's attention? Can they write in a way that is influential without being too complex or dense for leaders 2 to 3 levels above them to understand the impact that they're making on the organization?
So peer review, self-advocacy, and their deliverables.
Work quality.
Work quality. Yeah, that sounds pretty easy and practical to get through. But I've actually met people who were expecting a promotion. Ladies, I'm talking to you, who were expecting a promotion and didn't get it because, for example, they lacked the self advocacy that you recommended people have. So, my next question, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to grow their leadership skills and, for example, they're lacking that self advocacy portion? And I'm not just talking about early career professionals. We're talking about people who can be in a role for like 10 years, for example, but they just don't know how to do the self advocacy part well. But they know how to do their job
Mm,
well.
Well, I need to think about this one,
Okay,
Rihanna.
no problem. Stumped her, y'all.
Yeah, yeah. I think it comes down to documenting your work in whatever forum your organization receives information. That may be a monthly
Mm,
business review, that may be goal updates. Making sure that you are associating your name and what you specifically delivered to the organizational priorities and being vocal. I know it's so hard
yeah.
as a woman to speak out, but make yourself heard in group conversations. Like you
Mm,
are there because you need to be there and they invited you to have a seat at the table. So your voice should be heard. You should
mm,
never just be a listener. Part of the reason I ended up leaving Amazon is because I had a candid conversation with my manager about my career plan and my career growth desires. And she was transparent and honest with me that the organizational structure wasn't going to align with that plan.
Mm,
And so I think it's making sure your work is seen and being vocal and getting over any fear you have about being direct with your
absolutely.
leadership about what you want and what you need out of a career. We have a set time for us to accomplish our career ambitions before we retire. And I'm on, the second half of that career trajectory, so I don't have time to waste.
Mhm, mhm,
And so my leadership team will always know what I'm working to achieve,
mhm.
and I will seek that transparent, direct conversation on what is in for me next and what I need to do in order to hit that next level or career milestone.
Thank you for sharing that. And one thing that I really picked up on what you said was, don't just show up at a meeting and be a listener. You were meant to be there because you were invited. So make your voice
Hmm.
heard. That was so powerful. And
Hmm.
I I also heard you say that, like, get over this fear of your leaders, which is a common thing we have, right? Like, it's we're constantly thinking about as women, did we speak the right thing? Did we show too much emotion? Can we really
Hmm.
talk about this personal issue and how it's going to affect our performance? Can we trust our leaders? Like, there's so many different things that we're thinking about, and we're wondering, are we going to
Hmm.
be seen in the wrong way? Are we being seen the way we want to be seen and how we want to be perceived? I'm curious, for you, have you always been this way? Like, you've had this natural sense of self advocacy, or was there ever a point in your career where you didn't have it, but obviously you've built up to it? So I'm curious, which way was it for you? And can you walk us through that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't always had it. No, I think it took me working underneath a very strong leader who was a self advocate herself
Wow.
and was strategic about thinking ahead.
Mm,
She saw where the organization was going and was very strategic about putting herself and the team in alignment with it. So she didn't let the organizational structure happen to her. She influenced it. She brought herself to the table and said, "This is the problem I solve in your strategic plan and the skills that I bring to the table to solve it." And it ultimately led to her own promotion. And that helped lead the way for me, I think. So that was the turning point for me. But I would say there has been times in my career where I've sat in a meeting and presented to senior leaders and, it received criticism and then later on had an emotional reaction. But the feedback that I received is that I helped maintain my composure in the setting
mhm,
and then, had my opportunity to work through the situation later on with my direct manager. I do think it's important as a woman to find the right time
mm.
and situation to express your emotions because large scale meetings isn't the right forum, even if you're experiencing some strong
Absolutely.
reactions across a room.
Absolutely. You said something really important that, first of all, knowing the right time to express
Hmm.
yourself as a woman, I think that can go twofold, right? Someone could feel like, what? Like, I can't feel what I'm feeling? Like, I'm supposed to be able to acknowledge my feelings and be vocal about it. Yes, absolutely. Totally, 100% on that. But as you mentioned, there's a time and place to sadly express yourself and be authentic about what's really going on. And sometimes, as you
Hmm.
mentioned, large scale meetings with, when you have a VP or senior leadership present, it's not exactly the right time and place. But I'm hopeful that as, society progresses, it would be possible for women to be a little bit more themselves instead of kind of covering up in these large scale
Hmm.
situations. And the other thing that you
Hmm.
mentioned was your manager who inspired you, that you said she didn't let things happen to her. She influenced them. And that tells me that you were mentioning earlier, like, don't be a listener. Don't just be a listener, speak up. But it showed me that if you are a listener right now, the path to getting to that self advocacy is being an active listener and choosing an opportunity towards the end to speak up. And that's what I heard you say you did. Because in order for you to identify that about your inspirational manager, you yourself had to be an active listener and an observer to see that
Hmm.
she was not letting things happen to her, but she influenced them. And that sounds like what it's inspired you. That's what I'm getting. But tell me how accurate that was and what your comments are related to that.
I think that's spot on. It's really at its core understanding. what is a priority and what skills do I uniquely bring to this situation, and then being vocal and influencing without authority
Mm,
the right people.
yeah, totally. That sounds like the perfect transition into talking about product evolution, influencing without authority.
Yeah.
On that note, thank you so much. In the fast paced world of digital transformation, failures are inevitable. Can you
Yes.
share an experience where a project or initiative that you led didn't go as planned? And in the world of product, we know that always happens. So, looking forward
Yes.
to hearing
Yeah.
some of your insights there.
Oh, man. I have so many stories to pull on this. During my tenure at Amazon, I have rode the life cycle of products many times.
Hmm.
When I first started, we were at early on in the HR transformation phase, looking to implement third-party systems that would solve for core problems related to like document structure and self-service capabilities. And what I've learned from that is that pilots truly are pilots. They're meant to learn from something. They are not the ultimate deliverable. And what I've observed, there's a few examples, I would say. I launched a centralized service in India early on in my tenure, evolving that from a nationwide pilot and then led that to now it's a global, it supports 6 countries, a centralized
Oh.
service that has made significant improvements into time management. And I think what you need to accept, and I don't want to call it failure, I'm going to call it learning
Mm.
and growth, because there are key elements from the initial planning that have held true today.
Hmm.
But the way and the structure in achieving that has evolved. What I have found useful is clearly documenting the pilot outcomes and socializing those pilot outcomes along with future recommendations. In the use case of the centralized service, I not only requested funding for headcount in a centralized team based in India, I also asked for funding for 2 automations and proprietary products that ultimately would reduce the headcount forecast over years.
Hmm.
That was received really well. So coming back to leadership with what went well, what didn't go well, and a recommendation on what we could be investing in to
Hmm.
solve for those problems that didn't get achieved in the pilot. And that's happened over and over again in my career. It happened with a shared service model. It happened with an HR self-service chatbot. It's happened with a channel strategy for contact channels to a shared service model. It's happened with document management as well. So that's my learning. I think it's not accepting it as failure, but accepting it as education and then using that education to inform a plan
Now you
and
called
being
it something
comfortable with the
else.
plan changing.
You were
Yeah.
saying failure is not failure, it's learning and growth. Now you changed it to education. Why did you switch? I was just about to ask a follow up. So I'm like curious, why did you
Yeah.
switch that?
I think I just used a different term, but
Yeah.
my you learn from it.
Hmm.
And so it's education.
It's education. Okay.
Yeah, over time
Okay.
it's being comfortable with continual growth and also letting go.
Yeah.
Like letting go that you may have come up with the original idea, but who delivers the ultimate product or service may need to change because they are the right leader,
Hmm.
um, specific technology or team.
Letting go sounds like the hardest part, especially when
Mhm.
you talk not just about products in the professional world, but when you talk about relationships or your product is like your baby, it's like, oh, why is this person doing it? Was I not qualified enough? Then you start questioning yourself. You have this self doubt, even though your role wasn't meant to carry this product or a solution forward. You start feeling, well,
Mhm.
why then? Why not me? So, how did you detach from that when you had to let go of something and it was being handed over to somebody else to move forward? When that's really what you
Yeah.
wanted.
Yeah. Well, um, I think it took time. It took time to and realize at its core, what did that mean to me?
Mhm,
You know, personally, I I find myself gravitating towards product development, but at Amazon, my role was program management. And so organizationally, I wasn't meant to be the role driving the product development. I was the visionary and the strategist on what I
Mm,
needed out of a product in order to achieve strategic goals.
mhm,
And what I found was in reflection is that my career ambitions are different than the role I was assigned to. And
mhm,
that helped me understand, what do I want to do next? And what exposure do I need in order to achieve that?
mhm.
And so it was an influence on my leaving Amazon and moving to Wells Fargo. I'll have the opportunity to be directly on the product operations team and
Nice.
more directly influence the product development. But I think back to your original question, how did I let go? I worked with
Congratulations
the
on that, by the
partners.
way. That sounds like an amazing transition. Sorry, just wanted to
Thank you.
put that in.
Yeah,
Please continue.
thanks. Yeah, I think respecting and working with and educating the peers that were taking over from me on
Mm,
the why behind product needs has been something that has helped me let go, making sure that they understand the source of the problem and what are the potential pitfalls in the structure of a product or the architecture of a product that
mm,
could inhibit the long-term deliverable. Like, what the intent of the product, not just what are the features of the
yeah.
product, but what is the intent and the problem we need to solve with a product.
I'm going to sum up what you just said in one line, and you tell me if that was an accurate summary of what you said.
Yeah.
In letting go, you're leading the way for the ones who are taking over to move the product or solution forward.
Yes.
How did that resonate with you, and what are you thinking? Because it's like something's going on in your mind. I'm curious.
I'm thinking, wow, I just rambled. You could summarize that in one sentence and I went on forever. That's what I was thinking.
When I work with my clients, it's all about I have to like literally get out of my own head and make sure I'm not saying something that's going to bias what they're thinking, or I'm giving my own opinion. And like I'm like working through all of that, but through all of that, through those filters, I'm trying to capture insights for my clients. And I feel like that's what I was doing. I didn't mean to make you feel like you're rambling. That was a bad part on my side, and you're not rambling
No.
at all. But I want to take us back for a minute when you were talking about that failure piece, and you called it the overall umbrella term. It's not failure, it's education. And under education, it's learning and growth. What does, I don't like that word either. Like when you said, I don't want to call it failure, I want to call it learning and growth, and you change education. I don't like that word either. But I use that word a lot, especially when I'm calling for more guests to, come on the show, and I have failure as one of the topics, because that tends to resonate with people. People don't like it. They face failure a lot. It makes them feel gross inside and makes them, it's like an anchor that holds them down from moving forward. But
Mhm.
what does failure mean to you? And why do you believe it should be more about learning and growth and education and not really failure itself? I want your opinion before I dive into that a little bit.
Failure to me means I committed to something I wasn't able to achieve. And the difference between failure and learning and growth is removing yourself personally in a work world,
Hmm.
right? Um, you yourself are not, how do I want to say this? You are part of a broader organization that is working together to achieve an outcome. Tying failure to yourself, I think, is inappropriate because it could have been caused by a number of factors. Maybe it wasn't funded correctly. Maybe the timeline was unrealistic. Maybe the design wasn't right. There's so many things that need to fall in place for a deliverable to be achieved, and tying it only to yourself, I think, is overly critical
Hmm.
of your own abilities. And so reflecting on your own contributions to a broader plan and being comfortable with, like, acknowledging where you could have done better and where you actually brought a lot of structure or composure or organization or whatever you bring to the table, acknowledging that and exhibiting some gratitude, self gratitude, I think is really important. And that's how I tie it to education,
Yeah.
learning, and growth is you are part of a broader team,
Hmm.
and failure is the team's deliverable, not your own individual contribution. Taking time to do a lessons learned on what you yourself brought to the table and what the team went through, and ultimately not meeting an objective is how I would define that.
That's a wonderful description. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when you said failure is not doing what you committed to do, I was almost thinking that that means you can't ever not complete what you committed to do. That does happen so often. So how can
Mhm.
you expect, okay, failure to me means I'm not doing what I committed to do, but there are several times when that happens. So I love how you translate that into, well, if I wasn't able to commit what I wanted to do or what I was supposed to do, what went wrong? And that's where that whole education piece comes in. And then you grow from
Mhm.
that. And then you talk about the outcomes, like from the pilots that you mentioned earlier. Okay, the pilot didn't work out. It's not about me. It's about we and the greater whole. What went wrong? And then you look at what can be done better? What can we take away? What did go well? Because there's obviously something that goes well, but so many times we're so encapsulated by it didn't work out. We didn't commit to what we wanted to do, or we didn't achieve what
Mhm.
we were supposed to do, what was expected of us, that we just forget about all the goodness in it, even if it's just 2% and the
Mhm.
98% was like wrong. And I love that you mentioned that because that ties so well to the whole piece about it's not about failure. It's about evaluating what happened, learning and growing from it, and then we educate other people in the process. And my definition I
Mhm.
was thinking of as you were saying that is like, what does failure mean to me? Failure means I gave up.
Mm.
And I felt that tied so well with what you described because you talk about making a commitment. So first of all, you are accepting that, yes, I can do this. I have the capabilities. I've got the team. I'm going to move this forward. But something in the world happened or in the company that did not make that possible. So what you said,
Yeah.
it's not about you, but now my piece comes in. Are you giving up? And I
Mm.
feel that's what the real failure for me is. If I give up and I'm like, well, it was about me, then you're bringing it about yourself again. So it's not about you. And like you were saying earlier from the pilot, you were talking about implementing this automation from and figuring out how can you save Amazon money. That's like implementing the frugal principle right there. Like how can you save the company money and still grow the product? And
Mhm.
that just sounds like a wonderful opportunity. But I wanted to give you time to comment on what I just said because it looks like a thought was going through your mind.
I think you're spot on, but in self-reflection,
Mhm.
you can identify what to take forward and what to let go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a really interesting point that you brought up. And in the aftermath of failure and just thinking about like the learning, the growth, education opportunity, what advice would you give to leaders and even aspiring leaders on building resilience, sorry, in the face of failure?
For leaders, my advice would be to acknowledge your team's effort. All they can do is try the best that they can,
Mm,
to focus on the positives and acknowledge the influences that led to failure. Help them self reflect, help them identify what led to that failure and then work from it. Give them a voice and an opportunity to provide inputs into what went well and what didn't, and then deliver on any action plans that were discussed. And if you can't deliver against it, communicate it, be transparent. Like, tell them why something can't happen or offer an alternative that might solve for the same issue without meeting their initial ask. And also helping your team, like, on one-on-one conversations, bringing it into the growth conversations, talking about what didn't go well and asking them, what did you learn from it? What would you have done differently next time? So that they are thinking, next time it happens, what would I have done? Having a storyline, not just criticizing what happened without going into an alternative solution, giving them an opportunity to think through an alternative plan so that they can recall that the next time it comes up.
Thank you for sharing that. And especially on that last note about asking the team members what happened, what would you do next time? And I think that those are two such important questions, especially if you don't know how to be self aware or you don't know how to build that in you. That's a great starting point by asking them the questions they need to be asking themselves, and then they'll slowly build that muscle. I think that was a great point of
Mhm.
leadership that you just mentioned. But as
Yeah,
we,
and
oh,
I think as a manager, it's something that you need to be and grow in, and something I have grown in comfort with is your solution isn't always the right solution. They may come up with a different alternative approach
Mhm.
that works for them, that would have solved the same problem. And as a leader, I think you need to be flexible and open-minded to many different working styles, especially in an international team, understanding and respecting and being open to many diverse ways and making sure that you're asking them how they would have solved it gives them the opportunity to find a solution that works for them without directly giving them instructions. You can't do
Absolutely.
that. They're not going to grow through that.
No, absolutely. That makes sense. And I think that's another beautiful point you mentioned is letting go of yourself and feeling like you know every answer and you because you're the leader. People are going to come to you and expect you to know the answer, but sometimes people are going to come to you and expect you to know the answer, and then you turn it back on them. Well, what do you think we should do? Because their idea might actually be a better, more effective solution than what you would offer them in the
Mm-hmm.
first place. So I love how you
Mm-hmm.
open up that conversation for your team as well. And speaking of, leading international teams, as you mentioned, I
Mm-hmm.
can just imagine how much pressure and time commitment that would require. And I wanted to transition into work life balance a little bit on that note and ask you, have
Mm.
you ever felt pressure to prioritize your work over your personal life as a leader? Because I know many women, once you hit a certain point in the corporate ladder, it starts to feel like work becomes your life, whether, regardless if you're a mother or parent or pet owner or caregiver, that
Yeah.
seems to not take the front seat anymore. And I'm curious, how do you navigate those situations if you ever experienced that in your, whole history of your work life career?
That is so tough. And I have learned, I have burnt myself out over the
Mm-hmm.
years. There was
Mm-hmm.
a period in time where I was going into the office at 8, working till 5:30, going home. I'd walk home and then I'd log right back into work until 11 p.m. And then
Wow.
I do it all over again the next day. Uh, and that did not bode well for my relationships. It didn't bode well for my physical health. I put on a lot of weight. I got into depression, but I was achieving my career goals. I was getting
Mm,
great feedback at work. Helena is such a hard worker. She's so organized. And it was because I was just pouring myself into work.
mhm,
But I would say that what shifted for me was having a daughter
mm,
and realizing she needed me
mhm,
during my work hours. And so I started to introduce structure into my day to day that helped me prioritize what was most important. I implemented time blocking. I have a set time for email. I have a set time for strategic work, administrative work, and creative work each day.
mhm,
And when it's 4:30, I'm off the clock. I shut down. I don't look at my email anymore. I do have Slack in case something urgent comes up, but that's few and far between. And for my international direct reports, we had a set time each week that we would meet for an hour in their time zone or a time zone that worked for both of us. And it is tiring. I think it's when you have direct reports, making sure they have access and availability to you in a channel that is accessible and works for the both of you. That may be task management, it may be email, it could be like a OneNote or a live conversation, depending, I think,
mhm,
on their tenure and maturity and role. How much can you allow them to work independently? And as long as you have the structure in place, right? Their role is clear, their goals are clear. It gives you more freedom and time with international direct reports. As long as they know what they're delivering and how they need to deliver against the objectives, and you're checking in on their progress in a communication channel that works for you, the lack of overlap in the time zone, I think, has become less challenging in the
absolutely.
work life balance. That's what worked for me.
You know, when you said all of that, it sounded so simple. And I can see
Mhm,
how it is for you because you implement it so seamlessly now. Like maybe they might not have been that way at the start, but
mhm,
I want to paint a picture for you, and I would like your insight for women who might be listening, who might be resonating with this example. And I know women who are leaders and who have been in leadership roles for a long time. Like I'm talking like really high up in the corporate ladder chain, for example, or even as a manager. And one thing that women have a problem with is that they're not able to create that structure for themselves and those boundaries, especially if they've been a leader for a very long time. And all of a
mhm,
sudden, let's say, like you mentioned, I feel it's a very nice turning point when you become a mom. life just turns around completely. And it's a great point for self reflection and figuring out, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? So those moments are super helpful. But if you don't have that life
Yeah.
changing experience happen to kind of just pull you out to kind of give you a chance to recalibrate, and you've been
Yeah.
doing this leadership gig for a while, but you're starting to realize, man, I'm starting to burn out, but I don't know how to set these boundaries for myself. Or maybe I've set some for myself, but I don't know how to push back and really implement them so people start to respect them. What would you
Mm.
recommend for someone in that situation as a leader?
You are your own advocate. Nobody is going to advocate for you. You need to uphold your boundaries. Like it's a confidence thing.
Mm-hmm.
If the work is expanding beyond your capacity, you are not resourced to deliver against it. Either you're underperforming, and that's a different situation, or you're not resourced to do it. So you have to communicate those boundaries and communicate what you can and cannot deliver within a set time in order to justify headcount, to resource the role. If you are going to continue to burn yourself out, why would a leader or finance approve additional funding? They're getting what they need, right? Until the organization feels the impact, nothing's going to change. So upholding those boundaries is absolutely critical in order to right sizing teams, resources, and timeline.
There are two things there. So you said until the organization feels the impact, they're not going to justify the need for more resources. But that's another fear I feel most women have. If I
Mm.
show my team is not delivering or I'm not delivering on these expectations because clearly I don't have the resources, well, they're going to fire me. Or like in Amazon, I know they have this thing called performance improvement. I forget the other P, but it's called a PIP. So then I'll be on PIP next, performance improvement plan. And so then you're dealing with this fear of they're going to get me on PIP if I'm going to be fired, or I'm just going to burn the heck out of myself and I'm not going to be able to show up for my family or my other relationships outside of work. So how do I
Mm.
choose when I'm thinking about I need to make sure these boundaries are not crossed?
Mhm.
What do you recommend in that situation?
It goes back to our earlier part of our conversation about documenting your work,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that your leadership has visibility
Mm-hmm.
in whatever forum that may be,
Mm-hmm.
being communicative of and proactive with resource plans. I talked about
Yeah,
developing use cases and resource
absolutely.
pods in association with those resources, communicating that in advance to your leadership before something kicks off, before timelines start to slip, communicating what is needed based on your expertise to deliver the objective, giving them the opportunity to say yes or no
Mm-hmm.
to that resource ask.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no, you can, negotiate, I need a longer timeline,
Mm-hmm.
or um, referring back to that conversation or that document that you put in front of them at the start of a project on what was needed to deliver gives you credibility in the conversation. And it also drives some accountability with senior leadership on the decisions that they're making and the priorities that they are pushing forward.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, you'll find like there's competing priorities that come up unexpected, emerging trends that may require or pull your resources from it,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that it's proactively communicated in status updates, communicated to stakeholders that something's pausing because resources are being pulled elsewhere, or the work is stopping because we don't have the resources to deliver it, and communicating a plan for the future. Either it's moving to the backlog or we're canceling it entirely and rethinking the strategy because we don't have the resources to deliver against it.
Those some excellent strategies that you mentioned, and I hope listeners will be able to take those away and implement them in their own lives. And I think you made such a great point that, again, it's back to our earlier conversation. It's about pulling yourself out and not looking at
Mhm.
how this is affecting you personally, but looking at the greater picture. And how you were saying earlier, it's if you're finding yourself you're burning out, but you're not able to speak up, then it could be that you mentioned you're underperforming or you don't have the resources. And if you are not being that self-aware about yourself, you're doing yourself a disfavor. And on top of
Mhm.
that, if you in that situation, that tells that you didn't advocate enough earlier. So that's again back to your self-advocacy piece. So these are all really tied together. It doesn't seem like
Yeah.
they're kind of separated, and it makes sense that even if you're not in a leadership role, but you're aspiring to become one, or you've been a leader for such a long time, Boundaries is not about getting people to respect you. Boundaries means it's about respecting yourself and your own voice and building this confidence, as you mentioned, Helena, that in yourself, advocate without fear.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that fear is non existent, but it's to say that fear is not going to affect what you advocate for. You acknowledge that it's there, but it's not going to have any effect on you because you're removing yourself from the equation here. But you're advocating for what the team needs and what you need so that you can continue to deliver. And you're not just delivering for the work, but you're delivering for your life outside of work. How does that resonate with you?
I think that's correct. I think removing yourself from the conversation about boundaries and educating your leadership on and tying it back to the strategic plan. What is needed to deliver this and what capacity do we have to deliver against it? And having a very frank conversation where they have the opportunity to say yes or no, or challenge the resourcing estimations that you've put in place. You're removing yourself, you're identifying that I am 40 to 60 hours of work a week. And the ask is, quoted at so and so.
Mhm.
It removes the question over your boundaries. Like it's built into the plan. Build your capacity into the plan.
I like that. When you said 40 to 60 hours, I'm like, when did that even exist? I think it's like 70 plus now. Like people are working investment banker hours across industries. 40 to
Yeah.
60 is like 10 years ago. You know what I mean? It
But that
sounds,
comes back down
yeah.
to like that is people not self advocating for their boundaries. And companies are not going to hire more. They continue. And you don't see that in Europe, right? You don't see that in Asia. There's hold boundaries because they value their work life, and companies respect that because they don't have an option.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I know for a fact, Germany, they value and protect their people so much. So even if you're an international organization, if you have a branch in Germany, I heard they had such strict policies in place to protect the employees so they're not overworked, they're not working through any like specific holidays and so forth. So it just shows how much the country, not just the organizations, care about employees. So I think it goes back to what you're saying is you have to really advocate. And if you're not doing that, there's a problem, right? And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that note, of self-advocacy and asking for what you need, especially in tech, there's a lot of stress that comes with that, right? And managing burnout too. How has stress impacted you personally in terms of health, the way your overall being? And during these periods of transition and change, how did you navigate that? Especially as you're developing these boundaries for yourself, and how did you kind of just shift back to, okay, now I'm going to focus on me? What did that look like for you?
That was a journey,
Hmm.
I think. There definitely was a period, I would say 2 periods in my tenure where I hit burnout, and if you looked at my podcast history, it's politics, self-help. It's like politics, self-help, and news. So, I listen to a lot of self-help
Mm,
podcasts, and I've been focused on happiness and resiliency in my self-help books, and so
mm,
implementing a routine has been critical to overcoming burnout. I gained a lot of weight. I went into depression. I needed to focus on my sleep health.
mm. That sounds so powerful. And like how you mentioned sleep health, I think sometimes, even as a leader, we tend to look to sleep to sacrifice to get something done. And
Yeah.
I don't believe in that, but I know there are people who do it and they feel good about it. Like, I only slept 6 hours, like 5 hours last night or 3 hours last night to get this done. And I
Yeah.
stayed up all night. And it's like, okay, during college, that's a trend over all nighters and everything. So be intentional, be transparent, and not letting the job get into your life.
Yeah. Trying to
Mm,
separate yourself from the
yeah.
job. I think that's something that I learned
Hmm.
after I had my daughter.
Yeah,
There's so much more to life
absolutely.
than what you're doing at work.
And on that note, before we wrap up here, I'm really curious because I'm asking for women who can't do this for themselves, right? And I know your answer is gonna help them. You said you don't even touch your phone. That's amazing. And I hope all leaders can do that. I mean, hope I can do that too. Because I'm sleep deprived right now. I stayed up till 1 o'clock last night trying to prepare for this presentation I got later today. So I'm not the best example right now, but I'm going to use you as inspiration for today. I'm going to set a time that at this 11 o'clock, I'm done. I'm not touching anything else. I'm going to set up a routine. You inspired me today, Helena. I'm going to set up a sleep health routine. That's amazing. But for women, okay, so you sleep at 10, wake up at 6. You don't touch the phone until your daughter is on the bus. That is so hard. I cannot
It
tell
is.
you how hard it is for a leader because the first thing is on their mind is who needs me? What fire is burning? What do I need to help put out? How do you turn that signal off in your mind so you don't touch the phone between waking up and your daughter's on the bus? What is your solution for that? Or solutions if you have more than one?
Yeah. Uh, well, I'm not going to be able to solve any problems until she gets on the bus.
Mm,
She needs me. She's not independent yet. She needs my attention in order to get on my bus, and she's my number one priority. So,
that's so beautiful.
nothing about me looking at my phone is going to solve a problem. I'm just going to get anxiety and stress, and then I'm not going to be there and present for my daughter. So I started keeping my phone out of my bedroom.
Mhm.
I charge it in the bathroom. In the morning when I wake up, I do my hygiene. If I can, if I wake up on time, I try and exercise. Then I get her ready for school, get myself ready, get her on the bus, and then I have a cup of coffee. I sit down and I journal about my intentions for the day and what I need to prioritize. And then I look at my computer or my iPhone, and then I update my plan accordingly. So I focus on like self-care first, daughter, and then work prioritization and time blocking each morning.
It sounds like it all comes back to values and that self awareness of
Mhm.
what are my values, what's important to me. And then that other piece about building structure for the boundaries and respecting them yourself because nobody's going to respect them until you respect them yourself. And they're going to realize, oh, okay, I really don't have Helena's time right now. I need to wait until it's my time to get her attention. So that makes
Mhm.
so much sense. Thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
wisdom.
Yeah. I also think it's like making sure that there's secondaries in command.
Hmm.
If there is something burning that needs immediate attention, the benefit of working on an international team is you have
Yeah,
around the sun support.
absolutely.
So my customers or my internal stakeholders always knew the communication channels they could reach out to
Hmm.
for immediate support.
Hmm.
Don't make your email the emergency support line.
I love that. Don't make your email the emergency support line. Wow. And back to the whole advocacy piece, letting people know and communicating where they need to go when there is emergency before an emergency takes place, because you're not the one to
Yeah.
solve it when it takes place.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. So much insight shared here. We're at time, but I wanted to ask you, how do you want to close this up? And if there's any last words you want to share with listeners today about any of the topics we touched on and how you would like to close it up.
I want to say thank you for the opportunity. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What I would leave with is as a woman in tech, resiliency, self advocacy, and flexibility are so important to your success. You need to self reflect on what you're bringing to the workplace and what you bring to home, and then advocate for what you need in order to be happy because we really only have a set time that we're able to work. Also, only have a set time to be a mom, to be a mother or a friend or a colleague or a partner. And work is transient, but your family is there forever. So if there's anything that I've learned, it's prioritize family first. Career comes second.
And one thing I would add to that is there's a set time to live because
Hmm.
sometimes we wait until we find out we've got breast cancer. My mom had a stroke and she's not going to be able to come back out of the hospital. My
Hmm.
grandmother broke her hip and she only has this many number of days to live. When these things happen, that's when we realize, oh my God, I really can't do anything else. And I think what you were saying is there is a set time for everything, but also remember there's a set time to live that we don't have that much time on the world. So really take time to understand what's important to you and live out those
Yeah,
principles and give time to the things that you mentioned, not just the work, because there's so much more to living than work.
absolutely. I had cancer at a young age. So I
Oh
feel
my
like
God.
my perspective was embedded in me at
Yeah.
18.
Oh my God. I wish we could have talked.
Just tapping
Wow.
onto that. But yeah, my
But
perspective is totally aligned with you. I think
yeah.
you have to focus on what is your vision and your
Absolutely.
personal mission when you pick your work and define how you work.
Well, ladies, you heard from the best. Helena McNeil, now at Wells Fargo, incredible leader today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your beautiful insights. I really appreciate it. And, folks, we've come to the end of our time together. But before we go, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Give me a follow on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you have any other requests for speakers in the future or topics you'd like to hear about, send me an email, rayhanna@rawcoaching.com. I'll drop that in the show notes for you. And Helena, once again, thank you so much for your time today. I'm looking forward to our continued relationship together after this conversation.
Thank you.
And congratulations again on this new fantastic opportunity. I'm wishing you all the best in this role and just looking forward to seeing everything that you're going to accomplish and how you're going to just lead the way for the teams to become leaders themselves as well and in the organizations that you're going to be taking charge of as well.